I don't remember the exact moment when I realized that the reflection in the mirror didn't belong to me, but I do remember the feeling. It was sharp, like a secret whispered too close to the ear, unsettling and yet strangely familiar. I stood there in the bathroom with the sound of the faucet dripping, staring at a face that was supposed to be mine, but all I could think was, she's in there, trapped, begging me to notice. I had learned to keep my thoughts locked up. On the outside, I was just another boy growing into the mold expected of me. Broad shoulders, rough voice, untucked shirts, sneakers scuffed from restless steps. But inside, there was a different rhythm, a softer pulse that didn't match the body I carried. I used to imagine peeling back the layers of myself like pages in an old book, hoping I'd find her name written somewhere in the margins. That night, the moment clung to me like fog. I sat at my desk, staring at the glow of my computer screen, but the words blurred. I could still see her eyes behind mine, softer, brighter, aching to be let out. My chest felt heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. And then my hands, almost moving on their own, slid open the drawer where I had hidden scraps of her. A scarf that wasn't supposed to be mine. A tube of lipstick I had nervously bought in a store far away from home. A fragile collection of whispers no one else knew about. When I touched the fabric, something shifted inside me, not dramatic, not thunderous, but quiet, like the first flicker of a candle in darkness. I pressed it to my face and closed my eyes. For just a second, I wasn't him. I was her. But the second ended and the fear rushed back in. What if someone found out? What if this was wrong? My hands trembled as I tucked everything away again, shoving her back into the shadows of myself. I told myself I'd forget, that tomorrow I'd wake up and play the role I was given. And yet, I couldn't shake the sensation that I had unlocked a door I would never be able to close again. The rest of the night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling her heartbeat against mine. She was hidden inside me, and I realized with both dread and wonder, she would not stay silent forever. The morning light poured through my curtains as if it wanted to burn away the secret I had carried into the night. I got up mechanically, brushing my teeth, putting on the same clothes I always wore, jeans, hoodie, sneakers, the camouflage of an ordinary boy. But beneath that ordinary surface, something had shifted. The scarf, the lipstick, the fragments of her presence lingered on my skin even though they were locked away in the drawer. Walking to school, I caught my reflection in a passing shop window. For a split second, I tilted my head, softened my gaze, and wondered what it would take to see her instead of him. Just a flicker, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. At lunch, my friends talked about sports and video games. I laughed at the right times, nodded when expected, but I felt like a ghost hovering over my own body. Their voices seemed far away, as though I was underwater. My mind kept circling back to the drawer at home, to the scarf, to the lipstick, to the way my chest had tightened when I held them, not with guilt, but with recognition. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror again. I didn't plan to, but I couldn't resist. The drawer opened with a soft scrape, and I pulled out the scarf, wrapping it gently around my shoulders. The fabric felt lighter than air, but the weight of the moment pressed into me. My fingers hesitated over the lipstick. My heart thudded against my ribs, echoing like it wanted to break free. When I twisted the tube open, the color revealed itself soft, warm, a shade I had chosen without really understanding why, only knowing it called to me. My hand trembled as I brought it closer, then paused. The boy in the mirror stared back, daring me. I almost put it away. Almost. But then something inside whispered, "She deserves this." I pressed it to my lips. Awkward, clumsy, uneven, it wasn't beautiful, not yet. But when I leaned closer to the mirror, I didn't see a mistake. I saw a glimpse. A flicker of her face beneath mine, fragile and imperfect, but real. My throat tightened and tears welled in my eyes before I even understood why. That was the first time I cried, not because I hated myself, but because, for one fleeting instant, I recognized myself. The tears smudged the lipstick. The scarf slipped off my shoulders. The illusion broke. But the feeling stayed, rooted deep inside, refusing to be ignored. And for the first time, I whispered out loud to my reflection, so quietly that only the walls could hear, I think you're me. The whisper I spoke into the mirror echoed in my mind for days. I think you're me. I hadn't meant to say it, but the words slipped out like they had been waiting for years. Every time I thought about it, a nervous shiver crept up my spine. Did I mean it? Or was it just a passing thought? At school, nothing had changed. The same laughter, the same noise in crowded hallways, the same teachers droning on about formulas and history dates. But everything inside me had changed. I began to notice small things I had always overlooked, the way some girls braided their hair during class, the way their bracelets chimed when they wrote, the way they seemed to belong in their skin while I felt like a guest inside mine. The drawer at home became more than just a hiding place. It was a door. Every evening, I found myself opening it, sometimes just to touch the scarf, sometimes daring to smear the lipstick again. And each time, she surfaced a little more. My posture softened, my smile curved differently, my eyes carried a quiet light I hadn't seen before. It was like learning to breathe all over again. But with every step forward, fear grew alongside. I was terrified of being caught. Terrified of someone barging into my room, of my parents noticing, of my friends realizing I was drifting away from the boy they thought I was. At dinner, I chewed in silence while my father talked about practical things: grades, chores, the future. The words weighed on me, heavy with expectation. I nodded, but my mind whispered, "Your future isn't what they think it is." One night, when the house was asleep, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I had brushed my hair forward, let it fall messily around my face, and pressed the lipstick more carefully this time. When I tilted my head, I saw her again, clearer than before. A face that didn't quite belong, yet belonged more than anything ever had. I tried smiling, shyly at first, then wider, and for the first time, the smile didn't look borrowed. It looked right. But the sound of footsteps in the hallway sent a chill down my spine. My heart raced, and I wiped the lipstick away in a frenzy, shoving everything back into the drawer, locking her inside again. The door creaked open slightly, but no one came in. I froze in place, clutching my chest until the silence returned. That was when I realized how fragile she was, how easily she could vanish if I wasn't careful. And yet, that fragility made me protective of her. I couldn't explain why, but I knew with certainty she wasn't going away. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I felt her whisper again from somewhere deep inside me, "Please don't hide me forever." The whisper stayed with me like a promise. Please don't hide me forever. It was softer than breath, but it carried more weight than anything I had ever felt. I tried to push it aside, to drown myself in schoolwork, in video games, in the noise of daily life. But even when I laughed with friends or answered questions in class, the echo was always there, pulling at me, asking me to open the drawer again. A week passed before I dared to. The night was quiet, the kind where the air feels heavy and expectant. My fingers trembled as I slid it open, as though I was unlocking more than wood and metal. I was unlocking myself. The scarf, the lipstick, the tiny fragments of a girl who only lived in shadows. I held them gently, afraid they might disappear if I wasn't careful. But that night, I wanted more. I wanted to see her more clearly. So I crept into my mother's room while the house slept, heart pounding like a thief. Her vanity drawers were filled with mysteries, brushes, powders, colors I had only glimpsed from a distance. My hands hovered uncertainly before choosing a small compact mirror and a soft blush. I felt reckless, terrified, alive. Back in my room, I sat in front of the mirror and experimented clumsily. The brush grazed my skin like a secret touch, the color faint but enough to make my face look different, softer. It wasn't perfect, far from it. But it was a beginning. And when I layered the lipstick on top, my reflection startled me. She was there. Not whole yet, not polished, but undeniably there. My throat tightened and my eyes blurred again with tears. Not because I was ashamed, but because it was like seeing someone you've missed for years, someone you thought you'd never meet, standing right in front of you. I whispered, "Hello," to the mirror. And in that moment, it didn't feel crazy. It felt like greeting an old friend. But joy came tangled with fear. What if someone saw the makeup smudges I left behind? What if I couldn't hide the faint traces in the morning? I scrubbed my face raw with soap and water until no color remained. Yet, even when my skin was bare, I couldn't wash away the memory of her smile. The next day at school, I kept catching myself touching my lips absent-mindedly, as though the color was still there. My friends didn't notice, too busy arguing about some new game. But I noticed. I noticed everything. The way my voice caught on certain words, the way my hands wanted to move more delicately, the way I longed to be addressed differently, though I couldn't yet imagine saying it out loud. It was intoxicating and unbearable all at once. Like carrying a flame inside a glass bottle, fragile, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, empty-handed this time. No scarf, no lipstick, no blush. Just me. And still, when I looked closely, I thought I saw her eyes peering back through mine, silently asking, "When will you let me out for real?" It was strange how quickly my world divided itself into two lives, the one everyone could see, and the one only I knew existed. In the daylight, I was the boy they expected, half listening to teachers, kicking at stones on the walk home, making the right kind of jokes. But at night, when the door was locked and the lights dim, I slipped into the second life, the secret one, where she could breathe. The difference between the two lives grew sharper with each passing day. I noticed it in the smallest gestures, the way my body wanted to move differently, the way my hands curved when I held a pen, the way I longed to smile without forcing the edges into something stiff and rehearsed. It was as though she was gently rewriting me, line by line, from the inside out. But the fear of discovery never left. One evening, my mother knocked on my door just as I had brushed blush across my cheeks. My heart stopped. I scrambled, wiping at my face with my sleeve, shoving the makeup into the drawer, and trying to sound normal as I called out, "Yeah." She only wanted to ask if I'd finished my homework. When she left, relief poured through me, but it was mixed with guilt. I hated lying, hated hiding. And yet, I couldn't imagine the look on her face if she saw me as I truly was. That night, after the panic faded, I sat on my bed, clutching the scarf in my lap. The fabric was soft against my fingers, but it didn't feel enough anymore. I wanted more than scraps of borrowed things. I wanted her to be real, not just a reflection that vanished with soap and water. I began to research in secret, typing hesitant words into the search bar late at night: boy wearing makeup, male to female transformation, how to look like a girl. Each click felt dangerous, but also like opening a window to a world I had always suspected was out there. And what I found both comforted and terrified me. There were people like me. People who whispered the same words I had, "She's inside me." Some had gone further, some had embraced her fully. Their stories were raw, complicated, but radiant in ways I couldn't stop thinking about. If they could do it, maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just unfinished. But even with that comfort, doubt haunted me. What if I was deluding myself? What if this was just a phase, some strange impulse I'd regret? At school, I stared at the other boys, trying to see if I belonged among them. I tried to imagine myself 10 years from now, living the life everyone assumed I'd have: a wife, a job, children. The picture felt hollow, like an empty house with no light in the windows. But when I imagined her me, but free, smiling without fear, the picture glowed so brightly it ached. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, empty-handed, no props, no colors. Just me. I softened my gaze, tilted my head, and whispered the words again: "I think you're me." But this time, I added something more. "I'll find a way to bring you out." The promise I whispered, "I'll find a way to bring you out," wrapped itself around me like an invisible thread. It followed me through the hallways at school, through the noise of crowded cafeterias, through the quiet moments when I stared at my reflection in bathroom mirrors that weren't mine. I didn't know how or when, but the vow felt unbreakable. Days blurred together, and yet each night carried its own quiet transformation. I practiced small things in secret, gestures so subtle they might have seemed meaningless to anyone else, but meant everything to me. I adjusted the way I held a pencil, the way I brushed my hair, the way I let my voice rise and fall with softness instead of force. At first, it felt like pretending. But soon, it felt like remembering. There was one night I'll never forget. The house was silent, and I slipped into my mother's room again, stealing not just blush this time, but a simple necklace she never wore. It had a tiny silver charm shaped like a star. When I fastened it around my neck and looked in the mirror, something inside me cracked open. The star caught the faint light, and for a moment, I swore it belonged to me, as if it had always been mine. I touched the charm and whispered, "You're real." But reality outside my room was harder. My father started noticing the changes, not in appearance, not yet, but in presence. He asked why I seemed distracted, why I wasn't as tough as the other boys, why I didn't laugh at the same jokes anymore. His words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they reminded me of the role I was failing to play. I learned to mask better, to straighten my posture when he was around, to deepen my voice slightly, to nod at the right moments. It was exhausting, like acting in a play I never auditioned for. Every performance drained me, but every night in front of the mirror filled me again. One evening, I dared something new. I borrowed an old skirt from a forgotten box in the attic, dusty but still soft when I brushed it against my skin. Slipping into it felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. My heart raced, but not with fear, with recognition. I spun once, clumsily, the fabric swaying awkwardly, but the joy that surged through me was so raw it almost hurt. For the first time, I saw not just glimpses but a shape forming. She wasn't perfect yet, not fully visible, but she was taking form, like a sketch gaining depth with each line. And yet, when I folded the skirt and hid it back away, guilt clawed at me. What was I doing? What would happen if anyone ever found out? I lay awake that night, torn between two worlds, the safety of silence and the danger of becoming. But deep down, I knew the truth. The danger wasn't in becoming her. The danger was in never letting her out. I didn't realize how quickly secret moments could turn into secret needs. What began as experiments, lipstick, blush, a borrowed skirt, grew into something harder to ignore. I wasn't just playing dress-up. I was uncovering myself piece by piece, like excavating a hidden statue beneath layers of stone. But the more I discovered her, the more dangerous the outside world felt. My father's casual remarks about real men lingered in my ears, heavy as chains. My friends' careless jokes about boys who looked girly made my chest tighten with silent panic. I laughed along, pretending not to care, but inside I shrank smaller and smaller, terrified they would see through me. One day, in class, a girl sitting beside me leaned over to borrow my pen. Her bracelet brushed my wrist, jangling softly. She smiled in thanks, and I felt something twist inside, not desire in the way people assumed boys felt, but a deep, aching recognition. It wasn't that I wanted her, it was that I wanted to be her, to carry myself with that same ease, to have the world meet me without suspicion. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror longer than ever before. I didn't just want to see her. I wanted to know her. So I whispered, softly but firmly, "What's your name?" The reflection stared back at me, silent, expectant. I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one would come. The next days felt like walking a tightrope. My mother asked why my laundry seemed to take longer than usual. My father asked if I was spending too much time alone. Every question felt like a spotlight cutting through my armor. I stumbled over excuses, careful not to let my voice shake. And still, every night, I returned to her. One night, I dared something new. I let my hair down, brushed it forward, and applied the lipstick carefully. Then I fastened the star necklace, slipped into the hidden skirt, and stood back from the mirror. My hands shook, but my breath slowed as I stared. It was me. And it wasn't me. It was her. A fragile, unfinished version, yes, but undeniably real. My chest filled with something that felt like both relief and sorrow. Relief that she existed. Sorrow that she had been buried for so long. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, streaking the blush, softening the lipstick, blurring the reflection until it felt like she and I were melting into each other. I whispered again, "I'll find a way." And this time I added, "I'll find your name too." The promise to find her name became my secret mission. Every time I looked in the mirror, every time I slipped into the skirt, every time I pressed the lipstick shakily against my lips, I whispered questions to her. Who are you? What do you want to be called? What is the sound of your true self? But she stayed quiet, waiting, as though she knew the answer had to come from me. The silence gnawed at me during the day. At school, the noise of my friends felt louder, harsher, and I drifted at the edges of their conversations, detached. They noticed, sometimes jokingly accusing me of being spaced out. I laughed it off, but the truth was, my mind was elsewhere, always elsewhere, caught between the life I lived and the life I wanted. One evening, while scrolling aimlessly online, I found a forum. It was filled with people like me, hesitant, searching, caught between worlds. Some of them shared their chosen names, the ones they had claimed for themselves. Reading them felt like walking through a garden of possibilities, names soft as petals, names bright as fire, names that carried strength, names that carried grace. I closed my eyes and whispered some of them out loud, testing the weight of each one on my tongue. None felt quite right, not yet. But the act itself, saying them, imagining them belonging to me, stirred something inside. Later that night, I stood before the mirror again, wearing the skirt, the necklace, the faint traces of blush. My lips trembled as I asked her one more time, "What's your name?" And though she didn't answer, something inside me softened, as if she was smiling back at me, patient, knowing the time would come. But patience wasn't my strength. I grew restless, reckless even. I began sneaking out small items, a hair clip here, a bottle of nail polish there, things I thought no one would miss. I painted one fingernail in secret, just one, and when I saw it glimmer under the lamplight, my heart soared. But the next morning, I scrubbed it clean in panic, terrified someone would notice. My body felt like a battlefield, one side screaming to hide, the other screaming to bloom. And in the middle, I stood paralyzed, listening to both. Then came the night when I nearly got caught. I had been too bold, leaving the lipstick uncapped on my desk while I admired myself in the mirror. My door creaked open suddenly, my mother's voice calling my name. My heart froze. In a blur, I threw myself against the desk, shoving everything into the drawer with shaking hands. She only needed a moment, asking if I wanted tea. I forced a smile, prayed she couldn't smell the faint scent of makeup. When she left, my whole body trembled. It was too close, too dangerous. And yet, the moment the panic faded, I touched my lips where the color still lingered faintly. The danger made it real. The danger made it undeniable. I whispered, more fiercely than ever, "I won't stop." And in the mirror, even with the makeup smudged and the skirt wrinkled, she looked back at me with the same fire in her eyes. The close call with my mother should have been a warning, but instead it lit a fuse inside me. If anything, it made me crave more, like the danger itself had sharpened my desire to become her. Every night, I slipped deeper into that hidden world, and every morning I scrubbed it away until my skin stung. The double life was exhausting, but the secret one was the only place I felt alive. Still, the question of her name haunted me. Without it, she felt unfinished, like a painting without a signature. I couldn't call her forever. She deserved more. One afternoon, while helping my mother sort through an old box of books in the attic, I found a faded novel with a girl's name scrawled on the first page. The name was delicate but strong, carrying both softness and defiance. I whispered it silently, just to hear how it tasted in my mouth. Something inside me stirred. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it lingered in my chest long after we packed the books away. That night, in front of the mirror, I tried it out loud. The sound trembled, uncertain, but my reflection seemed to lean closer, listening. My lips curled into a shy smile, as though she approved. For the first time, I felt the beginnings of belonging to a name. But reality intruded quickly. At school the next day, one of my friends noticed me zoning out and teased me, "You daydream like a girl." Everyone laughed. I forced a grin, but the words pierced me. Not because they mocked me, but because they were truer than he could ever guess. Later that week, I dared something I had never done before. I went to a store, far enough from home that no one would recognize me. My heart raced the entire time, palms sweating as I drifted through aisles, pretending to browse. But when I reached the section of cosmetics and accessories, it was as though my body moved on its own. I picked up a small hairbrush and a tube of lip gloss. At the checkout, my voice nearly cracked. The cashier didn't even blink, scanning the items like it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. When I finally walked out with the bag clutched to my chest, I felt like I was carrying treasure, fragile and priceless. That night, I brushed my hair slowly, carefully, watching how it framed my face differently when it fell just so. Then I applied the lip gloss, softer than lipstick, gentler, a shimmer instead of a bold mark. The reflection that looked back at me felt closer to complete than ever before. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just stared, breathing slowly, as if I had stepped through a doorway into a world where she wasn't hidden anymore. And as I pressed my fingers to the charm of the necklace, I whispered her almost name, letting it settle in the air between us. It felt like the first brick of a foundation I had been waiting my whole life to build. The first time I whispered her almost name, it felt like striking a match in a dark cave. Small, trembling, but bright enough to see just a little further ahead. I repeated it to myself in secret over the following days, sometimes silently, sometimes under my breath, always careful to make sure no one else heard. The more I said it, the more it felt like mine, no, like hers. But with every step closer to her, the distance from my old life widened. My friends grew frustrated with my silences, my distracted stares. One of them nudged me during lunch and asked if I was depressed. I laughed it off, saying I was just tired. How could I explain that I was living two lives, and the one they saw wasn't the one I wanted to survive? My father's words grew sharper, though he didn't mean them to be cruel. Stand tall. Speak firmly. Be a man. Each phrase pressed into me like weights, pulling me down. I obeyed outwardly, but inwardly I wilted. The act of pretending felt heavier each day, like carrying a costume that no longer fit. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror longer than ever before. I wore the skirt, the necklace, the lip gloss that shimmered softly in the lamplight. I brushed my hair forward and tilted my head, watching how the angles changed, how my face softened when I let her shine through. I whispered the almost name again. And this time I added, "Is this you?" The reflection didn't answer, of course, but I felt the quietest nod inside my chest. A recognition. A step closer. But joy carried its own dangers. I began staying up later, losing track of time, so lost in her that I almost forgot the rest of the world existed. One night, I was still sitting at my mirror when I heard the floorboard creak outside my door. Panic shot through me. I shoved the makeup into the drawer, ripped off the skirt, and threw myself into bed just as the door opened. My father peeked in. "Why are you still awake?" My voice shook as I lied, "Homework." He frowned but said nothing more, closing the door again. I lay frozen in the dark, heart hammering. That night, I barely slept. The brush with discovery reminded me how fragile this double life was. But it also made me realize something I hadn't admitted out loud. I didn't just want to see her in secret anymore. I wanted her outside the mirror, outside the locked door. I wanted her in the world. The thought terrified me, but it also thrilled me. For the first time, I began to imagine what that might look like. Walking down the street not as him, but as her. Feeling the weight of the necklace against my collarbone under sunlight instead of lamplight. Hearing someone call me by the name I had whispered into the shadows. The dream was dangerous. But the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it grew. And one night, as I stood in front of the mirror with the lip gloss shining faintly, I whispered with a trembling smile. Soon. The word soon clung to me like a secret rhythm. I heard it in the scrape of chalk at school, in the hum of traffic outside my window, in the hollow silence when I lay awake at night. It was no longer enough to see her in the mirror. I wanted her to breathe air that wasn't stolen in the dark. But how? The thought haunted me. To step outside as her felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no bridge, no rope, no wings. And yet, every night in front of the mirror, when I brushed my hair forward, slipped into the skirt, fastened the necklace, and pressed lip gloss to trembling lips, the cliff didn't feel as high. It felt inevitable. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to test the waters. My parents were busy with errands, and I was alone at home. My heart pounded as I slipped into the skirt, brushed my hair, and added the faintest hint of blush. Not enough to be obvious, but enough that I could see her in the glass. I stood by the window, half hidden by the curtain, staring out at the quiet street. The sunlight touched my face, and for the first time, she wasn't just a shadow under lamplight. She was real in daylight, if only for me. It was terrifying. And beautiful. I pulled back quickly, afraid the neighbors might see. But the taste of that moment lingered. She belonged in the sun. That evening, I couldn't stop imagining what it would feel like to step outside, even just to the corner of the street. I played it out in my head, walking with careful steps, the necklace swaying lightly, the gloss catching light, the skirt brushing against my legs. My pulse quickened at the thought, part terror, part longing. But with longing came shadows. What if someone recognized me? What if my father saw? What if the whole fragile world I had built collapsed in a single glance? The fear kept me inside that night, but the dream grew sharper. I knew it was only a matter of time before the walls of my room couldn't hold her anymore. Before bed, I whispered her almost name again. It rolled more easily off my tongue now, as if my body was learning to shape itself around it. I pressed my fingers to the charm of the necklace and made another vow, quiet but fierce. You will walk outside. Not someday. Soon. And for the first time, when I closed my eyes, I dreamt not of hiding, but of stepping into the light. The dream of stepping outside refused to fade. It followed me into mornings, into the restless drag of school days, into every glance at my reflection in classroom windows. I would catch a glimpse of my face, tilt my head ever so slightly, and think, she's waiting. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, my parents went to visit relatives, leaving me with an empty house. At first, I thought I'd just savor the freedom, linger in the mirror longer, let her breathe without the constant fear of footsteps. But as the silence settled around me, a bolder thought crept in. What if I didn't just stay in my room? What if I opened the door, walked down the street, let her touch the world for the first time? My hands trembled as I dressed. The skirt, the necklace, a careful touch of blush, the lip gloss. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud. Just enough that when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see him pretending. I saw her. Nervous, trembling, unfinished, but her. When I slipped my feet into shoes and stood by the front door, my heart thundered so loudly I thought it might crack my ribs. I stood frozen, hand on the knob, listening to the silence of the house. The choice weighed heavy, safety behind the locked door, or truth waiting just outside it. I turned the knob. The air outside wrapped around me differently, as though the world could sense the shift. I stepped onto the porch, knees shaking, eyes darting to the empty street. It was quiet, almost too quiet, every sound amplified, the chirp of crickets, the hum of a streetlight, the faint rustle of leaves. I took one step, then another. The skirt brushed against my legs, the necklace tapped lightly against my collarbone, the gloss caught the glow of the street lamp. My breaths came shallow, but with each step, something inside me swelled. Terror and joy braided together, twisting into a feeling I had never known before. For the first time, she wasn't just in the mirror. She was under the open sky. I didn't go far, just to the corner and back. But by the time I slipped inside and closed the door, my chest heaved with more than nerves. I pressed my back to the wall, tears spilling down my cheeks, a shaky laugh breaking through. She had walked outside. Just a few steps, but enough to prove she could exist beyond my room. Enough to prove she was real. That night, as I lay in bed clutching the necklace charm, I whispered her almost name again. And this time, I didn't just whisper it. I claimed it. It wasn't almost anymore. It was hers. It was mine. The night I claimed her name, something inside me settled. It wasn't peace exactly, the fear was still there, the doubt still heavy, but it was like planting a flag on new ground. For the first time, she wasn't just a shadow in the mirror. She was named, she was real, and she was mine to protect. The days that followed felt different. I still wore the mask at school, still nodded and laughed at the right times, still shrank under my father's stern voice. But beneath all of it, the name pulsed like a heartbeat, reminding me of who I truly was. Every time someone called me by my old name, I repeated hers silently in my mind, like a secret shield. but the taste of the outside world lingered. I couldn't stop replaying that short walk to the corner and back, the skirt brushing my legs, the air on my face, the way the night had wrapped around me as though it belonged to her. It wasn't enough anymore to live in stolen minutes. I wanted more. One weekend, I tested my courage again. This time, I went a little farther, down the street, past the quiet row of houses, my steps shaky but determined. Every sound made me jump. A dog barking, a car in the distance, a door slamming somewhere. My heart pounded with the risk of discovery, but with every step, I felt her growing stronger inside me, as if the world itself was teaching me how to carry her. But danger was never far. A neighbor's porch light flicked on, and I panicked, nearly tripping as I hurried back home. By the time I locked the door behind me, my hands were trembling uncontrollably. Fear and exhilaration tangled together, leaving me breathless. I looked in the mirror afterward, makeup smudged, hair messy, chest rising and falling like I had run a mile. But her eyes sparkled back at me. Not with perfection. With life. That night, I lay awake and realized something that chilled and thrilled me all at once. The double life couldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the walls would crack. Someone would see. Someone would know. The thought terrified me, but it also sparked a quiet fire, because part of me wanted to be seen, not caught seen, truly, fully as her. And for the first time, I let myself imagine it not as a nightmare, but as a possibility. The idea of being seen lingered in my mind like a fragile flame, flickering but refusing to go out. I carried it with me everywhere, in the classrooms where I sat pretending to focus, in the cafeteria where laughter roared around me, even in the quiet moments at home when I washed dishes beside my mother. What if one day I didn't have to hide? What if someone looked at me and saw not him, but her? The thought terrified me more than anything else, and yet it pulled me forward like a thread I couldn't resist following. My experiments at night grew bolder. I practiced softening my voice, experimenting with small phrases, whispering her name until it rolled off my tongue like it had always belonged to me. I studied my reflection, noticing how a tilt of the head or the gentle parting of lips could change everything. She was learning how to exist not just in stolen glimpses, but in sustained presence. But danger tightened around me like a net. One evening, as I scrubbed makeup from my face in a panic, I realized my skin was red and raw. I stared at myself in the mirror, bare, exhausted, trembling, and for the first time, I felt anger. Not at her. At the world. At the lie I was forced to live. At the way I had to erase her every night as though she were a mistake instead of the truest part of me. I clenched the sink and whispered fiercely, "You deserve to stay." The next day, I carried that fire with me. At school, I caught myself almost smiling when someone teased me for being too quiet. Quiet, yes, but not empty. Quiet because I was filled with something too bright to explain. But the real test came one weekend, when I decided to take her outside in daylight. Not far, just to the backyard. My hands shook as I fastened the necklace, brushed my hair, applied the lip gloss. The sun was warm, the grass soft under my feet, the air alive with birdsong. I stood there trembling, waiting for some disaster, a neighbor's glance, a voice calling my old name, but none came. For a brief, golden moment, it was just me and the sunlight. Not stolen, not hidden. Free. When I stepped back inside, my heart ached with longing. I couldn't go back to shadows forever. She was no longer content with whispers. She wanted to live. That night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I made a decision that both terrified and thrilled me. The next step wouldn't be just for me. The next step would be telling someone. The thought of telling someone felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. My secret had lived in the shadows for so long that the idea of letting it touch another person's ears seemed impossible, dangerous, like dropping glass on stone. But the fire inside me wouldn't let it go. I knew it couldn't be my father. His words about strength and manhood still echoed too sharply. And I wasn't ready for my mother, not yet. But there was one person, a friend, quiet and kind, who had always seen me even when I tried to disappear. If anyone could hear me without laughing, without judging, maybe it would be them. The plan formed slowly, in fragments of courage stitched together by fear. I invited them over on a weekend afternoon, nothing unusual. We sat in my room, talking about school, music, ordinary things. My heart raced, every word I spoke pressed against the truth I was hiding. At one point, they leaned back in the chair and said, "You've seemed different lately. Like your mind's somewhere else." My throat tightened. The silence stretched. And then, before I could stop myself, I whispered, "There's something I need to tell you." Their eyes softened. "Okay." I hesitated, every instinct screaming to retreat, to shove the words back into the drawer with the scarf and the lip gloss. But then I remembered the sunlight on my skin in the backyard, the shimmer of gloss under the street lamp, the way my reflection had smiled when I whispered her name. I couldn't bury her again. So I spoke. Clumsy, halting, but real. "There's someone inside me. Not the person you see. Someone else. Someone I think I've always been. And she has a name." The silence that followed was unbearable. My friend didn't laugh. Didn't frown. They just sat, watching me, letting the words hang in the air. Finally, they said softly, "Do you want to tell me her name?" Tears welled before I could stop them. My lips trembled as I whispered it, the name I had claimed, the one that felt like home in my chest. Saying it out loud to another human being felt like stepping off that cliff I had feared for so long. Terrifying. And yet, liberating. They smiled. Not forced. Not pitying. Just gentle, steady. "It suits you." The dam broke. I cried, not with shame, but with relief. For the first time, she wasn't hidden. She wasn't just mine to protect. She had been spoken into the world, and someone else had seen her, heard her, and said she belonged. That night, when I stood in front of the mirror, I didn't whisper. I said her name aloud, strong and certain. And for the first time, the reflection didn't look unfinished. She looked alive. I knew the road ahead would be hard. There would be questions, struggles, people who wouldn't understand. But none of that erased what had happened. She was no longer a shadow. She was no longer trapped. She was me. And she wasn't hidden anymore.